Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I always make clear, this show has a single purpose, holding the politically powerful institution of policing accountable. And to do so, we don't just focus on the bad behavior of individual cops. Instead, we examine the system that makes bad policing possible. And today, we'll do so by reporting on the recent arrest of a popular auditor for filming a police station. But what makes this incident so informative is that it happened after Mr. Turner, also known as the cop watcher Batusai, had won a protracted battle in court to ensure that right to take video in the first place. But before we get started, I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please email it to us privately at par@therealnews.com and we might be able to investigate for you. And of course, you can always message me directly at Tejas Baltimore or Twitter or Facebook. And please like, share, and comment on our videos. It really does help us. And you know I read your comments and appreciate them. And we also have a Patreon link pinned below, and we have some special goodies for our Patreon family. So if you have a few bucks, you know what to do. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way. Now, it's pretty clear that the mainstream media has an undeniable sense of contempt for what is known as cop watchers or auditors. As you may recall, 2 weeks ago, we reported on how the mainstream media used this great reporting by Laura Shark and Tom Zebra on a horrifying case of police brutality without attribution. And not to be outdone, a Kansas TV station put a copyright strike on Lackluster Audit's YouTube channel for using this legally obtained dash cam footage. And recently, the New York Post ran an article on a New York City auditor who they described as an agitator simply seeking clicks for cash. That's an ironic take from a tabloid that runs pictures of women in bikinis on a regular basis. But the reason I bring this coverage up is not to be a media critic. No. Instead, I think it's a perfect way to introduce our topic today and a way to show, not tell you, how our colleagues in the corporate media often miss the forest for the trees, and that the process of auditing can lead to real substantive change, and how the act of turning a camera around on the people who hold power over it is a more subversive act than perhaps it appears at first glance. What am I talking about? Well, take the coverage of Eric Brandt. According to local Denver media, Eric is an out-of-control YouTube agitator who is best known for threatening judges. And yes, his threatening words were and are offensive. But as we've pointed out in previous shows, he's also been instrumental in achieving real police reform and making case law that has set a precedent for how people can protest the police and how cops must be trained to respect the First Amendment rights of everyone, which is a perfect lead into the story we're focusing on today. That's because 2 weeks ago, the police arrested a well-known cop watcher, Philip Turner, also known as Batusai, for the heinous crime of, wait for it, filming a police station. The arrest occurred outside the Corrigan, Texas Police Department as Batusai was taking video. But despite the fact the law clearly said what he was doing was perfectly legal, they arrested him anyway. Let's watch.
No unauthorized person in or around patrol vehicles.
Right, but the front door's right here. Unless you have another entrance that I can walk to avoid being next to patrol cars, then I can do that.
It don't work that way.
It doesn't work that way?
No.
Okay, so
You got his name and date of birth?
No, it's not his name.
What's your date of birth? You got an ID?
No, I just told him who I was and what I was doing.
Your last name.
Because you're
Turner?
Turner?
Oh, am I being detained right now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm being detained.
Yes, sir.
You got to put this down.
Okay, so they're taking my. Okay, let me put it. I'll put it down. I'll put it down.
Turn it off.
I'll put it down.
And this. Because you're breaking city ordinance.
Okay.
Take that off.
Take it off. It's important. I don't want to touch it.
Take it off.
But that's not the end of the story. Because what makes this case so egregious is that Batusai's filming of the police and the arrest that ensued has much more importance than the act itself, and it says much more about how substantive the work of auditors can be. That's because Batusai had previously won a lawsuit against another Texas police department, which clearly gave him the right to film anything having to do with the police. In fact, this dispute, during which he was previously arrested for filming cops, has been codified case law, ensuring that the First Amendment right of the citizenry cannot be limited by cops ignorant of the law. Even more intriguing is the fact that the town had amended an ordinance to ensure that people could film police and law enforcement facilities, in part as a result of that lawsuit. And it is a clear violation of the law by police. And the contradiction it reveals shows how our constitutional rights seem to be lost in translation, which we will be talking to Batusai about shortly. But before we talk to him, I'm joined by my reporting partner, Stephen Janis, who has been researching the case and reaching out to authorities. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me.
Ted, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, first, you reached out to the police department for comment. What did they say?
Well, I haven't heard back. It's a really small department. I couldn't even find a contact person there, but I did send an email to an address and tried to contact them on Facebook, and we'll hear back. But it's a very, very small department, very, very small town, so I don't know if I'm going to hear anything.
Also, this case law seems pretty specific in terms of ensuring police can't arrest people for filming. What did the court rule, and what does the amended law say with regards to this type of activity?
Well, it's very clear. You can film a police station. The law and the ruling is not ambiguous, and there's no real circumstances that can bar you from doing that. But of course, that was always really been the case. And what's really disturbing about it is that he had to go to the extent of filing this lawsuit and going through this just to get the right to film police in a police station. And I think it's really clear, and I think this is settled.
Now, finally, you yourself have faced pushback from the police for filming public buildings. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, almost every building I try to film in state government, I, at one time or another, had a cop come up to me and say, "What are you doing?" And it gets pretty disturbing because you can't do your job, but also because most of these officers don't know the law and they don't know it's okay to film a public building. This happened to me a lot, especially in Baltimore City, when I tried to film the Juvenile Justice Center, when I tried to film a state building, a state health center for a health story, and I was accosted by a police officer. So camera people and cop watchers are constantly having to push back on the rights, even after they're established, and I think this shows just how poorly law enforcement is trained.
Now, to get more details on his arrest and to explore the ramifications of what this latest example of law enforcement overreach means, I'm joined by Batusai himself. Batusai, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So first, I just want to ask you a little bit about your alter ego or your YouTube name, Batusai. So who is Batusai and what does he do?
Long story short, I didn't have any intentions of recording police. That was not my intentions when I created my channel. The purpose of me creating my channel was because I wanted to get into video game clips and video editing and just kind of like, more like the comedy style of videos and things of that nature. And for whatever reason, I got pulled over and stopped for driving late at night. And that happened to be like my first video that I uploaded to YouTube. And then as soon as I uploaded that video to YouTube, I just kind of went down a rabbit hole with other videos of other people with various encounters. And I was just kind of shocked and surprised that, it's not just me or a handful of people. This is a very common thing that's going on.
Now, you actually made case law, didn't you? I believe the case is Turner versus Driver. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so with that one, that turned out to be a little bit special. Before Turner vs. Driver, I was constantly getting arrested and detained for just taking pictures of, public buildings and public areas, which, everybody's like, well, you have that right to do that, don't you? I mean, the average person may think so, but it's odd how police would categorize that as suspicious behavior, suspicious activity, when photography itself is not suspicious in any way, especially if you're not doing it in a suspicious manner. And another activist put me in touch with an attorney called Kervin Althofer Jr. I sat and I spoke with him for 2 hours. He wanted to know, like, hey, before I take on any of your cases, I've seen your videos. I just wanted to make sure you're in it for the right reasons. I just want to make sure that, there's no, other side to this. So we sat and we talked for about 2 hours, and he agreed to take on all my cases. I pretty much put my funding for my lawsuits and put it into this case, and we pretty much went forward. Then the notice came in the email, said that the courts wanted to do an oral argument, which is what I was told was pretty rare. And my attorney was like, I've been doing law for 25 years, and this is the first oral argument I've ever done. And he said this is going to be pretty interesting. So the oral argument's online, and I heard it, and I was just pretty impressed with the level of detail, and the judges are not trying; they're trying to be impartial, and And then it gets to the point to where the important questions gets to ask, like, we might as well establish that you do have the right to record police because everybody knows you do. And then got the I believe we got the notice saying that it was established February 17th, I believe. Yeah. So when we got notice, we were pretty happy. We made history, and then from then on, I always get like an update whenever my case law is being used in another uh, lawsuit or another case. So it's pretty cool knowing that your name is being referenced in other case law.
So, what happened to you last weekend? I mean, you were arrested for recording in a public place, right?
I was sent over a video of an individual who was standing in front of the police station door. It looked like he was trying to ask a question. The lobby was closed, so he rang the doorbell to see if he can get some assistance. And then, like, I guess a couple of minutes later, you see a patrol car come, and an officer steps out, and just the encounter just goes downhill from there. Once the officer's like, "I don't answer any questions," when the individual specifically said he had a question. So you can already tell that the encounter was going downhill from there. And then as I was watching that video, I noticed or I heard something very interesting when the officer said it was against their ordinance to record. Now that really kind of struck a chord with me. And I was like, the case law was established years ago. So why are we regressing right now? What's going on? And where can I find more information about this ordinance? So after I finished watching that video, the ordinance was 8.600. I looked online to see if I could find anything about that ordinance. I was not able to. And City Hall was closed, and I wanted to maybe go to the PD and get answers. So as a journalist, I went and documented the whole situation, gave people the backstory. Uh, as soon as I arrived, it was pretty much like a 3 hour and 42-minute drive. So yeah, I was really wanting to get some answers on that because that was very mind-boggling to me. So I stood across the street and I was able to see some of the signs, but I couldn't really make out what they were saying or what the specifics of those signs were saying until I got closer. Uh, when I got closer, it became clear that there was just no recording inside the patrol car, and I was like, well, I mean, I don't have any plans to record inside the patrol car. I mean, that's not what I'm here to do. But I'm here to figure out, what is this ordinance and why is it there and what the main reason for it is. So lucky for me, the lobby was open. Went in, spoke with the young lady behind the counter. I didn't think she was going to send anyone out. I just happened to think as soon as I walked out the door and stood out there for a little bit, just a random officer came by because she told me that the other officers were on traffic stops. So I didn't at that point. I felt like I probably didn't think I was going to speak to someone. Officer comes up and he makes it clear that it's against their ordinance to record uh, the police, record in this area. And I say, well, we're in a public area. This is perfectly fine. And in the meantime, it didn't hit me that I was being detained like right then and there. Like I was just trying to get questions, and he was like, who are you? What's your name and date of birth? After I gave him a business card. So it hit me like, oh, you're detaining me. Oh, okay. And then as soon as that made that statement clear, the second officer just takes my camera and puts it on the top of that. And I didn't want him to take it because the camera was expensive. The camera was like almost $7,000. Like I didn't want them to just grab my camera or fight with them over it. I was like, okay. I'll set it down. So I set it down facing the opposite direction. And when I did that, the officer turns off my live stream. So and it's and I kind of want to back up here a little bit because I want like a lot of people to understand, like when you record, like there's an art to it. Like if you have your camera set up a certain way, or if you're very knowledgeable on how to use your equipment and you're quick with it, you're able to flip it to show different angles. So as soon as they took my camera, I quickly tapped on the phone to swap the camera view so it's facing me, so that way it shows them turning off my live stream. So with that, I was just like, wow, you guys are literally turning it off, and it shows which officer turns it off. So there's no dispute about that. It happened and the officer was caught on camera. Um, at that point, the officers redirected their attention to my body cam. I did not want to touch it. I did not want to show them how to take it off. I wanted to let them do the work because if they couldn't take it off, then they're just probably going to leave it there. So they eventually found out how to take it off. And then when they took it off, I tried to kind of distract their attention or try to re-divert their attention towards me and away from my equipment because I realized my camera was still going. So it captured some very interesting conversations about why they had the ordinance there. And it became clear that it was YouTubers. YouTubers are the reason why they have this ordinance. People who come up here filming are the reason why they have the ordinance. The officer, the one who turned off my camera, said, "You're the third person that came up here recording." And I was like, okay, so it makes it very clear, why you have this ordinance, and you're pretty much trying to make up your own laws and just disregard what the Constitution says.
So you're a cop watcher and an auditor. How does what you do different than other auditors?
I mean, I think I started off as like a First Amendment, like it all started as a First Amendment test. Like that's what it was always called before it was called audit. I'm not sure how First Amendment audit came about. Like, I think it just kind of caught traction because everybody started, categorizing it as that, and then now became the auditors. Um, I don't necessarily think I would call myself an auditor. I would probably say I'm more of a video journalist. I like to, because I know there's some people who read like the articles and stuff online. However, I was thinking about branching out as like kind of like showing, the situation and kind of like giving a backstory on it, and then letting people watch the video and come to their own conclusion.
So tell me about some of the work auditors have done to make things better for residents and to hold police accountable.
As far as like whenever I watch other people's videos on YouTube, I get messages about like, what do you think about this style, or what do you think about how this, you know, auditor's doing it? And I told them, I said, look, everybody has their own style. Everybody's different. There's an audience for everything. And as long as they're not breaking any laws, then they're fine. Like you have the right to do what you have to do. You have the First Amendment right. You have free speech. You have those things. And I am, I pretty much, uh, you know, encourage people to use their First Amendment rights, especially when it comes to free speech. But that's just something that I don't do because I know, there could be some backlash when I go to the court level. So that's what I try to avoid. But from a just like a looking into it, I'm just open to everybody's style, and there's an audience for everything. And I respect everybody's style, just as long as they're not breaking the laws.
Now, I think it's interesting that there's so much controversy over the simple act of filming a public building. I mean, with all the clear issues that plague this country with regards to income inequality, global warming, and a seemingly endless pandemic, you'd think a man with a camera would be the least vexing problem for government officials to solve. In fact, the notion that police and the courts have time to make arrests, charge, and otherwise process what could at worst be described as the most victimless crime ever really makes me question the idea that we hear so often from elites and politicians that police need more resources, not less. And what's even more ironic about this whole incident, besides the fact that there was settled case law that prohibits what happened, is how uncomfortable government officials are when citizens turn the cameras on them, in contrast to how easily they like to turn the cameras on us. I mean, if you look around my city of Baltimore, there are too many cameras to count. That's partially because our city has its own CCTV system, which constantly monitors people throughout the community with a variety of cameras that are often hidden and used in ways that are accountable to no one. In fact, it wasn't too long ago that our city police department hired a so-called spy plane to fly over the city without telling any of us, an act that was done in complete secrecy. It was also a move that entailed hiring a company without our spending board's approval, called, and I am not being ironic, persistent surveillance. And that's not the only method government officials use to monitor us. Let's remember that license plate recognition technology is standard operating equipment for most police departments. And let's not also forget that we're in the nascent phase of police using facial recognition software, which I should note has already led to several false arrests and multiple lawsuits. But that's just the beginning of how easily the elites feel free to surveil us. Bear in mind, we are literally living in the age of surveillance capitalism, an era where billionaires can monitor every click and web page and every photo and every scrap of data we post to rack up profits for themselves. They literally have an open window into the very marrow of our lives. Data that they gather has led to enormous profits and billionaire largesse. And I might point out a weaker network of independent journalism and other institutions of alternative information that are very much diminished by these tech behemoths. The point I'm trying to make here is that at the very least, we should have the same rights afforded to the powerful, wealthy, and otherwise entitled. Perhaps the point auditors like Patusai are trying to make is not just that they can film a police station, but a deeper, more symbolic commentary on just how extreme the imbalance of power is between the governed and the governors, the watched and the watchers. I mean, if the police have the money, time, and energy to arrest a man for filming a building, let me repeat that, a building, there must be something truly consequential at stake to literally waste court time to arrest and prosecute a man holding a cell phone camera. Maybe it's what he represents that is more threatening than the act itself. The point is the act of filming them, the act of turning the camera around on them is perhaps the first and most symbolic gesture of defiance that the powers that be can't handle. Maybe turning the camera around on them is what they perceive as the first step towards a general lack of compliance with the other transgressions these powerful institutions and wealthy interests have foisted upon us. Maybe they're afraid that if we really look through the lens, we won't like what we see, that we won't accept the fact that police have pricey and generous benefits and lifetime pensions while the rest of us drown in debt over unpaid medical bills. Maybe we don't like the fact that most of us became poorer during the pandemic, while just a small group of billionaires increased their wealth by $500 billion. Maybe we won't like the fact that as rural hospitals close and teacher salaries are frozen, the police keep getting free new military equipment from the government to give them even more tactical power over the people who can least afford it. Maybe that's why they fight so hard to keep us from watching. And maybe that's why we won't stop turning the camera on them. I would like to thank my guest, Philip Turner, better known as Batusai, for joining us here today. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, I have to thank intrepid reporter Stephen Janis for his writing, his research, his editing, and his hard work on this piece. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Taya, thanks so much for having me. I just want to give a shout out to Jimmy Touchdown.
And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't thank friend of the show, Noli D, for her support. Thanks, Noli D. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. You can also message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or Instagram, or at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And of course, you can always message me directly at Tejas Baltimore on Twitter and Facebook. And please like and comment. I do read your comments and appreciate them, and I try to answer your questions whenever I can. And we do have a Patreon account linked in the comments below if you would like to help us continue to do this type of independent reporting. My name is Taya Graham, and I'm your host of the Police Accountability Report. Please, be safe out there.